Western Australia has just had their state election. The Western Australian voters had the chance to turf out, or at least significantly reduce the Labor majority in Parliament, and it appears they declined to do so. However, the results are not necessarily great news for Labor, and not great news for the Liberals, and they're slightly interesting if we're looking for how these are going to bode for the federal election. So let's dig into these, and if you've got any thoughts about the WA election, well, let me know that in the comments below. Now, the thing I want to start off first is that the election appears to have been a little bit of a schmozzle. There are reports that some polling stations ran out of ballot papers, which is a little bit absurd. After all, the electoral officers have one job: to let people vote, and if they can't even manage that, it tells us that it's a bit of a trash fire. But nevertheless, votes have been coming in, and we're seeing that Labor Party has done rather badly. At the time of recording, not much of the vote is counted. Only about 40% of the vote is counted. However, there's been a 17.5% swing against Labor. They appear to have lost 4 seats, at least according to the ABC. Now, that massive swing against Labor has translated into a small bump for the Liberals. The Liberals are, at the time of recording, up 7%, a swing of 7% toward the Liberal Party. Now, the Nationals have had a swing of 0.1% toward them, and they've gained 1 seat. So in essence, the Liberals and the Nationals have gained 4 seats in total, which doesn't sound like very much, but they were coming from a very, very, very low base. Labor, by contrast, has seemingly lost 4 seats. Now, interestingly, like I've said, Labor has had a 17.5% swing against them. So it begs the question of where did that swing go? I already mentioned the Liberals, but the Greens picked up some of this, amazingly. The Greens picked up 4.6% of a swing toward them, which is truly catastrophically disturbing. Whatever we think about the two major parties, they're less bad than the Greens, who are extremists in the extreme. Now, One Nation also picked up a little bit of a swing toward them, but only 2.3%, and others, which would be people like independents and the like, perhaps libertarians maybe, but regardless, they picked up 3.5% of a swing, but they didn't secure any seats either. So that leaves us with, at the time of recording, the Greens have failed to secure any seats, One Nation also has failed to secure any seats, and none of the other groups have secured a seat either. The Greens got 11.5% of the vote, One Nation 3.6% of the vote, which means the Liberals and the National Party, well, they secured just over 30% of the vote themselves, and Labor 42% of the vote. So what that tells us is overall, we are seeing much of the same. Now, an interesting thing to dig into here is, of course, the seat-by-seat analysis, because that gives us a bit of an idea about how the Liberals and the Nationals might do in the upcoming federal election. And here, we're seeing some mixed views. The Australian reports that this was a disaster for the Liberal Party, a disaster for the Coalition because they failed to secure a significant swing toward them. The Australian has also noted that the Coalition has failed to make much of inroads in inner-city Perth-type seats, areas that were once the Liberal Party heartland that they were hoping to pick up. But we can look at some of the seats, and we're looking at the overwhelming majority, and effectively all of the seats in Western Australia, well, the Coalition got a massive swing toward them, or at least the Labor Party got a massive swing against them, whichever way you want to look at it. There are some seats where there was a swing away from the ALP toward an independent. For example, in Fremantle, there was a 34% swing from the ALP toward an independent. Indeed, there's not really any seats where there was a swing toward the ALP, which tells us that while the ALP has managed to secure its significant majority in WA, and while Anthony Albanese might take some solace in that result, he can't exactly take too much solace because there was a massive swing across the board. Indeed, at the time of recording, I can only really see maybe one seat that was swinging toward the ALP, and that would be generous, and that seems to keep changing over time as more and more votes are coming in. In essence, we're getting a situation where this doesn't necessarily bode well for Anthony Albanese. Now, the thing is, though, that while an across-the-board swing can be meaningful, and it can tell us that maybe Anthony Albanese is going to have his work cut out for him, it doesn't necessarily tell us that the ALP is going to lose many seats at the federal level, nor does it tell us that the Liberal Party will pick up many seats. This is because if we're looking at some of the seats the Liberal Party wants to pick up, well, one of them is held by a Teal. The Teals, to my mind, are utterly insufferable, but one of them is held by a Teal, and this doesn't mean that the Liberal Party is going to pick up that Teal seat. Indeed, the Teals, in their insufferable exhortations, appear to be managing to get more and more votes, at least from the electorates in which they're sitting, even if the rest of everyone else seems to rather dislike them. So that's one of the major issues the Liberals are going to face. Now, at the federal level, it does appear that in the 2022 election, the ALP picked up 4 seats, the Liberals lost 6 seats. And of course, one of the Teal independents picked up 1 seat, which came from the Liberals. So the Liberals do have some scope to be able to pick up some seats, perhaps seizing them back from the ALP. However, they would still need a non-trivial swing for them to be able to do so. For example, there was reportedly a 10% swing against the Liberals in the 2022 election and a 7% swing toward the ALP at that election. Now that's on a primary vote basis. On a two-party preferred basis, of course, well, the two even out. 10.55% toward ALP, 10.55% toward the Liberals. Now this means that if we're looking at the magnitude of the swing in the WA state election, if we assume that is going to continue at the federal level, then maybe Peter Dutton at least has a couple of seats within his grasp. But that is seemingly a bit of a maybe, as not totally clear those will all translate. Certainly not clear enough of them will translate into Peter Dutton being able to score a majority. Then we add on to this the fact that state elections are often decided on state issues. For example, the botched and truly ham-fisted Aboriginal heritage laws in WA have really been on the nose, particularly in more regional locations. But that doesn't appear to have actually translated into the Labour Party losing any seats, or at least not losing many seats rather, which tells us that even though there was an incredibly unpopular state issue, the state Labour Party has still managed to retain power. And it's not clear at all that this is going to translate into the federal Labour Party losing any seats. And the net result of this is that it's not at all clear to me that Peter Dutton is necessarily going to pick up all of the seats he really needs in WA. Now, of course, I would dearly love to see the Teal candidate turfed from Parliament, but again, I don't see that as being particularly likely, unfortunately. After all, The Australian is reporting that Labor's emphatic WA win sets the PM to hold on to key federal seats. Digging into this, they say, West Australian Labor has won a state election victory that could set the party up for another 2 terms, and Anthony Albanese has been given hope in his difficult task to hold on to key seats at the May federal poll, after Premier Roger Cook won a historic 3rd landslide. Mr. Cook's ironclad grip over all corners of Perth saw him sitting on a two-party preferred vote of more than 58% on Saturday night, and win at least 40 seats, and what was set to become the ALP's biggest election wins in history, nationwide, and only overshadowed by his predecessor Mark McGowan's record-breaking landslide in 2021. The West Australian Liberals fell flat in many of the former stronghold seats that they were expected to regain, with the party set to fail to win seats such as South Perth, Scarborough, Riverton, and Bateman, all of which have been touted as all but certain to be reclaimed. But Labour's primary vote statewide dropped 18% on Saturday's counting from the last state election, with a particularly strong swing against it in WA's regions, where anger over a botched attempt at revamping cultural heritage laws and the Albanese government's live sheep export ban saw support for ALP recede. What this basically means is that there probably isn't enough of a swing toward the Liberals for them to really pick up much additional support in the upcoming federal election. Anthony Albanese, at the time of recording, seems set to call a May election. So we'll wait to see exactly what happens then, but I suspect that they will remain in power, because that means we're going to get a Labour minority government where Labour is forming a coalition with the Teals and the Greens. But do let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below.